So we're going through this sermon series on 1 Peter, Rocksolid, faithful in the face of opposition. And the last little bit has been incredibly practical, particularly if we go back a couple of weeks, where Peter deals with what happens if you are a Christian, the government's opposed to you. Well, they knew all about that. The people he was writing to, they were under persecution. Things were going horribly wrong. And then it came to, okay, what do you do if you are in a bad work situation? He was dealing with the worst of all work situations. He was dealing with slavery. And okay, so if you're in this situation, how is it that you can continue to be a Christian if you're in this horrible situation? Then he starts dealing with marriage. So what happens if you're a wife or you're a husband and things are going poorly there? And he basically has the same answer for all of them. You act like Jesus. And we dealt with a bunch of sermons, and we saw how God used these people basically to change their land. Took time. But the more they acted like Jesus, the more impact that they had, even though sometimes we don't want to act like Jesus when things are going wrong. So it doesn't feel as immediately satisfying. We won't lash out, we won't go against this. And so the last little bit, as we get closer to this section, then he kind of takes a little bit of a wider view and he starts to go through and basically say, if this happens, here's why I want you to act like Christ, because you're going to have an impact. And do you know what? The more you act like Jesus, the more you serve, when it's really hard to serve, the more you are going to be able to put aside the things of this world, all the things that distract, all things get away, and you are going to become more and more aware how blessed you are by God. The blessings of God will flow into your life all the more, and God desperately wants to bless each one of us. He wants you to find your satisfaction in Him, to have purpose, to have the reality of God flood your life. But it's so easy to get distracted by everything, isn't it? It was, in many ways, a very difficult week, I know, for a lot of people here because the Oilers didn't make it past the second round. And I know there was a few folks who felt a little heartbroken around here, right? And I've seen some smiles, so I know it's true. As we went through that series, I didn't get to watch the last two games, which was very sad. But as we went through this series, there was a few people in our region who were a little on the upset side at the officiating. Because there were some calls they felt went very much the other way. And I started to read some comments and hear comments from people about, it was almost like a call to riot against the officials from some people. Man, we got to get up and we got to say something about this. And do you know who wasn't doing that? The players. Do you know why? Because they couldn't focus on the officiating. They had to focus on what they needed to do, which was play the game. They couldn't allow what was important to be disrupted by something that in the end they had no control over. Something that they could actually make worse if they allow it to become a distraction. And do you know what? That is exactly how it works in the Christian life. We are not to let things that should not be a distraction become a distraction. And instead focus on what really matters, on what is eternal, on what lasts. Hope exists within Jesus. And we only find it when we let the material become secondary to what is important. The Bible doesn't promise, ever, that everything is going to go well. Never promises that life is going to be good. What it does promise is that God's reaction to us will be good. That God will look after us, that God is going to care about us, that our satisfaction and purpose are found in Him, and we can find joy when we discover the importance of eternity. The fact that we are going to live with God today and forever, and that's what matters. We can have peace. Since God is greater than ourselves, God is greater than our world. Oh, but it's so easy to let things distract us. We tend to focus on everything that is not Jesus. We focus on our problems. We focus on our anger. We focus on the opposition around us. And we see those things and we miss Jesus. We need to, and when we do that, we're taking ourselves away from the blessings that God has for us. God created you to be blessed. And there is a natural consequence of acting like Jesus, especially when it's not easy, but also when it is easy. That when we serve and we love, instead of focusing on the negative and being judgmental, that is where we are blessed, because we realize our purpose and we become more like Jesus. We're going to delve a little bit deeper into this. Read, it was last week, where Isaiah gets up and he talks about being overwhelmed with joy. That's God's purpose for you. To be overwhelmed with joy. It's worth digging into. To opening ourselves up to the Holy Spirit to discover exactly what that means, even at times where it's scary. So we're going to go through some verses here. Now, who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled. Good. Zealous. That's not really so much the point. We can sometimes focus on what that really means. But what he's after here is this. You might go through some difficult moments, but guess what's going to happen at the end? Something good. Now, if God is bringing you to something good, even if everybody stands against you, even the world is trying to bring trouble to you, does it matter? Does it matter if you have to go through a struggle to get somewhere good, to get somewhere better? Remember the blessing. Remember that God is after you. Now, some people have looked at this. Oh, if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. That's an interesting statement. There was a guy. It was Origin. He lived like way back. Like 2nd century. Time of persecution. Wasn't long after the New Testament was written. And he read this verse. And it was during a time of persecution. He lived in North Africa, and the church was under intense persecution. They started to arrest some of the Christians. And it was on the same day that he read this verse, and he got this idea in his head. Hey, if you're blessed for being persecuted, I should go and get persecuted. So he decided he was going to run out and find the police and turn himself in. Now, fortunately, he was still a young man. He was a teenager. He was starting to get ready for the day. His mother knew what his plans were, and she hid all his clothes. Probably a wise idea. It's not saying go out and try to be persecuted. That's not our goal. It is for some in our day and age. There's others who have read this verse and saw the same thing. Ever had the knock on the door? You open the door and there's 2 people standing there. You realize right away it's the Jehovah's Witnesses. at them when they come by. You know they want that? They know they're annoying. You know that? They actually read this verse and they take it out of its context. They think, I could be blessed if I get somebody to get mad at me. So they will go out and they're sweet and they're smiling and all that kind of stuff because of some of the things we're going to read in the next verse. But they really actually want you to get mad at them. Do you know that? Why? Because they think they get brownie points with God. See, God is not calling us to be persecuted, but He is telling us this. You know what? If you go through a difficult time, it's not just persecuted. If you go through times where people are against you, or opposed to you, or negative to you, if you go through a period of time where people are acting towards you in a way that's unfair, that you don't deserve, we need to remember that God's love is still there. And maybe He's using that to develop us. And so maybe we should go along with what God is trying to do because He's trying to develop us. Rather than just going against Him and then against the people of this world. Because He's working. And what is eternal matters much more than anything else. So we have a good question there. What harm can come to you if you're doing good? If you're suffering for righteousness' sake and God is on your side? In the end, our suffering secondary. But then he goes on and he gives 4 responses he's after and a reply at the end. It's in the next couple of verses. It's dealing with people who understand what it means to suffer. Persecution, the economy's bad, they're going through struggles. When we're put in those unfair, sticky situations where people are warping our words or putting us in unfair situations, how do we handle it when we take the heat? Now, I told the story back in January of just after we came back from our holiday, just after Christmas, and we ended up going through Fort Lauderdale Airport right after being shot up. And we ended up in this long 4.5-hour lineup, and everybody totally silent because this horrible event had occurred just hours earlier. And we went through this lineup, and it was crazy because it was totally silent in the airport. But there was the odd person who just, wasn't real happy with being this. Most people got it. But when we finally got to the front, there was people kind of beside us with the next, working with the next people along the counter, the next ticket agents, and they were trying to reroute their flights, and I was actually kind of embarrassed because they were getting quite upset because they didn't like how long they were going to sit in their layover. And they were, it was kind of embarrassing because they were talking about how long they didn't want to sit in the Toronto airport. Well, these are Canadians. And Canadians being not acting very nice, and I really wanted the person just to get mad at them in some ways. Because that person could look at them and say, you're inconvenienced, but yesterday I was getting shot at. Kind of puts it in perspective, doesn't it? Actually, they did a very remarkable job. They kept their cool. How unfair, right? Peter's talking about this. Okay, you're going to go through something that's unfair. How are you going to deal with it? And he's going to give 4 very practical ways which you're going to deal with it. I'm not going to put the entire verse up on the screen. I'm going to put the little highlights. And the first thing that he's going to tell them is, okay, if you are going to act as a Christian, the very first thing you're going to do is you're going to honor Christ. In fact, the whole thing is he's going to say, you're going to honor Christ the Lord as holy. And getting that name proper is going to be part of what Peter's after. He doesn't just say Jesus. He says Christ the Lord. Sometimes we may start to think that the name Christ is Jesus' last name. It's not. It's a title. It's a title. Literally, in the Greek, it means anointed one. Basically means as the one who is being sent from God. Honor him as the one who's being sent from God. And then it calls him Lord, the idea of master. Okay, this one, Jesus. Sent from God, Lord. Treat him as holy. Treat him as holy. Honor him as holy. Why is that so important? Holy is the idea. Set him apart as who he should be. The word holy is to see somebody as different. And in this sense, it's almost like what Peter is saying. Okay, so you're going through a tough time. You want to focus on the fact that Jesus Christ is your eternal King, that you want to focus on what he has called you to do. Here is the very first thing. You put Jesus up here, you put all your problems below. See, first and foremost, who Jesus is and what he has done for you. Worship and love him. I was at some denominational events this week, and they had a video clip that they showed us. And it was from just before Christmas. And just before Christmas, the Alliance Church in Stony Plain had a fire on Sunday morning, just after church. The building actually went to flames. It was full. It was arson. For some reason, this didn't really make a big wave in the papers, the fact that somebody lit fire to a full building. But anyways, Stony Plain Alliance Church caught fire. A couple of days later, now they have a little bit of a different building situation. It was kind of like the fellowship hall, the office, all the Sunday school rooms, youth rooms, all that's what burned down. The sanctuary actually was separate, and it survived. So they were able to have a service a little bit later on in the week. And it was almost kind of like a memorial service for the building. And they got together, and the pastor got up, and he said, you know what, we have only one response that we could possibly have to a situation like this. It's to worship. You know, he's bang on right. He said, to gather together to worship. And the reason why was then he quoted somebody in his church, and he said, you know, my life was thrown upside down. I mean, this was my workplace, my life, everything happening here. All of a sudden, all got turned upside down, and somebody in the church, he said something that struck me. And it was a very simple statement. He said, the reason why we need to worship today is because God does not just redeem people, in other words, bring us salvation, but he also redeems situations and problems. Redeems situations and problems. In other words, God can take the hardest moments of our lives and do something good, and so we worship. And he says we should be prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you the reason for the hope that is within you. We've often in the church taken this verse and seen that it's kind of saying that we should understand our salvation message, we can explain salvation, we should have an understanding of how we can prove to people that there is a God and that Jesus is God. And that's all good, and I think that fits in this. But that's not the heart of the message, what he's after. He's after this. If you are going to act like a Christian, can you explain what Jesus has done in your life? Just tell the story of how Jesus made you different. Can you be able to express to the world what's happening in your heart? It's amazing the difference that makes in our lives, because it cements in our minds and in our hearts what Jesus has done, but it also helps everybody else to understand, yeah, I'm different, and the reason I'm different is because Jesus loves me. Third thing he says, let's do with gentleness and respect. He says, yet do it with gentleness and respect. Sometimes that can be tough, because we like to get argumentative, particularly if somebody's coming up against us. It's really easy to do the fight, isn't it? I mentioned the Jehovah's Witnesses a few minutes ago. I'm sure I've told this story at some point in the past, but I remember one time they showed up at our door, and it was two really young guys. I mean, I was quite a bit younger at the time as well, but they were younger than I was, and they were barely past being teens. And they showed up at my door, and they wanted to argue Greek with me. I've studied a lot of Greek. They didn't stand a chance. And I argued with them. Do you know what? I won the battle, but because I argued with them, I lost the war. Because all we did was argue. It's not what we're called to do. That's not the point of it. The better thing is to love people, care for people. That was what Jesus did. I mean, sometimes he did fight back about the Pharisees, but he also spent a lot of time making bread and fish for huge crowds of people, some of whom certainly wouldn't have cared for his teaching. Went around and he healed, he loved, he talked with people. That's what he did. That was his way, not arguing. His way was loving. Coming up to people and caring for them. I ran across this all the time. I even got in a discussion just the other day with somebody who said there was somebody who they felt had treated them poorly, and they said they fought until they got an apology. I asked them, so what did it accomplish? He kind of stared at me and blankly, and I don't know. What did it accomplish? Made you feel okay? Well, maybe for a minute. Did it make their lives any better? Did it make anybody's lives better? Probably not. Do so with a good conscience. He says, having a good conscience so that when you are slandered, he's going to continue going on from there. Not everyone's going to recognize the things of God are necessarily good. But if you live in the hardest moments in a way that is contrary to the common way of our world, it's going to make a difference. So do so with a good conscience. And the result of all this is, he says, after this, so he says, having a good conscience so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. Our goal is to worship God and to find our satisfaction and our enjoyment in Him. But it also convicts people of sin. Our goal is not to convict people of sin. God's going to do that. But it gives us the opportunity to do good so that God will be glorified even in their lives. And they are made different. There's one more verse in all this, and it leads us to the good result. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if that should be God's will, than for doing evil. This is a statement of how God's going to see the world. It is better for things to go wrong and have good things done first. You know what? If we live the Christian life properly, in a way that is evident to the world that we are living in Jesus' way, we become like a magnet. Now you have to think about a magnet for a moment. If you've got a magnet, full magnet, with positive and negative poles, Sometimes you put them together. You've got the right poles together, and they pull together, right? Sometimes you put them the other way, though. Magnets don't just attract, they also push apart. Some people are going to be drawn to the words of God, but the opposite is also true. Some people are going to be repulsed by it. That comes right out of Scripture. There will be those. Oh my goodness. Do you know what? Computers drive me crazy. The reason we had a problem with PowerPoint earlier is doing it again as Windows wants to reset right now. Yeah. I think when we talk about persecution and all that, I think it's Windows is behind it all. No. Oh, this is what happens when a company becomes too powerful and thinks too much of itself and thinks it can shut itself down whenever it wants to. Anyways. Do you know what, though? Our concern is we want to attract people. That should be what we want. But our goal is to glorify God and to enjoy Him. And if we do that, what the rest of the world does, and if we're focused on Jesus, what the rest of the world, you know what? Great if they follow us. Great if they come to us. Great if they flock to us. We want that. But if they don't, we also recognize there's an opposition in this world, and there isn't much we can do about it. It's beyond our control. So don't worry about it. Focus on Jesus. Focus there. Life will have difficulties. People will reject. People will do dumb things. That's a promise. That's there all the time. And there are things that will come up that make life hard. So who do you want to please? What do you want to do? Do you want to find that blessing? Peter's just talked about this blessing that God has for you? Or do you just want to end all these battles because people do dumb things? The way Peter phrases it, I think the answer should be obvious. We should want to focus on the things of Jesus. So we're going to sing a song commitment that talks about that. I'm going to invite our worship team up. We're going to sing hymn 231, Oh, to be like you.